Good afternoon and thanks for coming in. If you are seeing me for the first time, I am Rachel Charles and I am a freedom mindset and manifestation coach. I work with people who are feeling the overwhelm of full-time work and parenthood, and many of them may have also suffered with domestic abuse and trying to find themselves after that. I help them to breathe life back into those hopes, goals and dreams that they thought were once lost, and I support them in designing a life or living a life that they design rather than the one prescribed. So how are we doing this Saturday? Thanks for coming in. Oh, I wanted to show you my t-shirt. My mentor has put some merch out. Oh, I had to show you. Keep it simple. You can say the rest. But it's a good reminder, because I know that I am one of those people who will add extra steps into something that sometimes doesn't need to be there. And it's like, nah, Rachel, just overcomplicating it now. Come on, just do it. Jump in, get it done. So yeah, absolutely love it. And blue is my favorite color. So I've entitled this video Imposter Syndrome. It's something that I thought I wanted to talk about today. So let's get into it. So imposter syndrome, that feeling of not being good enough, not fitting in. Why am I here? What is my purpose? Am I going to be found out? And it can affect us at any time. It can be something that we've always dealt with throughout our lives, and something that is extremely crippling, because it can stop us from going forward and meeting goals or whatever plans that we had, because we feel that we're either not good enough, we don't compare to the other people. Why am I sitting in this room? Sometimes people talk about having a seat at the table, and you could be sitting at the table, being in a job, being wherever it is you are, but feeling that maybe I don't belong. It made me think about something that happened for me, and a lot of the time I talk about my own experiences. That's, obviously it's the way that I've come to understand to work with people, looking at what has happened for me and some of the ways that I've been able to get past it. So it made me think of an experience that I had and stayed with me for a very long time. So you would have heard that when I was younger, I moved out to the Caribbean, and I went to what was seen as kind of like the worst secondary school on the island. It was one that nobody cared about, basically. And going over to Grenada, that's a country, and I went there in the January and did common entrance in the May, passed, and putting down my options for secondary school. That school was one that everybody said to my mum, don't let her go there. It's not a good school. And they listed, the more prestigious schools. And I remember the top three that I put down. I can't remember the fourth one, but they were the schools that, if you were, good, or if you wanted your child to excel, those were the schools that they would go to. So I put those down. Didn't get my options, but I kind of resigned myself to, okay, this is the school that I'm going to. Got to exam stage and I did really well. I broke the record for the school at the time. Until then, everybody, I think the most that they'd ever had was about 5 subjects. And when I got there and did my CXEs, or as you would call GCSEs, I got 9, and they were all A's and B's. So I did quite well, and I was feeling quite apprehensive, because it was just like, oh, okay, so what's the next step? And the next step would have been going to college, and I felt unprepared. I was, this girl from the country now going into town every day in college, whole new world. And I remember choosing my subjects, didn't have any guidance, and halfway through, or just as we were starting the second semester, I thought this is not what I should be doing, because the topics that I chose was not, and I during that time I was able to look around and think, okay, I prefer to do that and I prefer to do that and I want to drop that one. And they actually allowed me to drop one of the subjects, but refused to let me pick up another of the subjects that I wanted to. I knew that if I had got the notes and sat in the class, I would have been okay, but they decided that I wasn't, that they didn't want to do that. And so what happened was I ended up going through college doing at least one of the subjects that I probably should never have done. Hello, Janine. Thanks for coming in. I'm here every Saturday, usually at 2 o'clock, but I was doing a workshop earlier and it kind of ran on, so I'm here later. Thanks for coming in. So I'm talking about imposter syndrome, and something that affected me and how it affected me, I would say, and an experience that I had when I was in college. So now I'm in college, did very well in secondary school. Now I'm in college doing subjects that not even probably, there's one subject that I didn't need to do anyway. It was just a subject that I loved, but with the right guidance, I probably wouldn't have chosen it as an option. And so got through college, and there was a experience, and that's the experience that I want to talk about. And I'm already sitting there, like I said, as this young girl from the school that nobody really bothered with. It never really went on the map until after I did my GCSEs, and it was just like, oh, so that school can produce, kids who can perform. And then since then they've gone on and they've broke my record and that kind of thing, and I want to go and do my exams again and break them again. But anyway, so I'm sitting there feeling, do I belong here? Am I doing the right thing? I feel totally out of place. And I remember sitting in a classroom, sitting in the hall, in the lecture hall, and the professor, I've been trying to find this man's name for the longest while, but he was at the front of the class, I'm at the back of the class, trying to blend in. And he said something like, some of you in here are going to struggle. And I could feel him looking at me. And he said, some of you in here, and this was how good it was, because I did so well in my GCSE, my CXEs as it was called, because I did quite well. I had an interview in the local newspaper, in the island's newspaper. So a lot of people had seen it. So I'd gone into college and it's like, oh yeah, that's that girl from that school that nobody cares about. But she had done well. And he said, some of you, you may have got your 8 or 9 subjects, but you're going to struggle here because, I can't remember the words he used, but it was kind of like, you're not going to excel because you're not good enough. And it was kind of like saying that, yeah, you can excel in that small pond, but here you're not going to. And I sat there and it was like somebody just sucked all of the air out of the room. Hi, Noreen, how are you doing? And my chest got tight and I looked around. It was like cold sweat started to break out on me. And I thought, and I could see him, he was looking in my direction. Also, I thought, and he was just saying, some of you might have been stars in your secondary school, but you're here and, you're not going to excel. You're going to be out of your depth. Looking back, I'm not quite sure why you would say that to kids. I was 16 at the time, trying to find myself, feeling already totally out of my depth. And here is this guy confirming to me that I did not belong. And for a very long time, I got through college. I can't really say I struggled. I got through the subjects. I didn't pass as well as I did in secondary school. But in the back of my mind, I felt that I didn't belong. I felt that, maybe I had reached my limit of how good, I was ever going to be. And that feeling did follow me through into other jobs that I've had since then. Made me think, sometimes I remember being in one particular job and it was going really well and I had to do something else. And that feeling came back of, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe, you know, I'm in the wrong place. Maybe, you know, they've given me this responsibility, but maybe I'm not good enough. And it's just to show how one simple statement from someone can just throw you back and affect you for quite some time. So yes, it affected my college work. I felt, you know, my self-worth was quite low. Yes, it even followed me into different jobs. And it wasn't until many years later that I kind of stopped and just thought, right, something isn't right here. I can't measure myself based on what somebody said to me, and that feeling of not feeling good enough. And I remember a few years ago, I say a few years ago, this is probably like nearly 10 years ago now, where I had one of my managers, and this is when I realized that I was not alone in this feeling of maybe I'm not good enough. And I remember him saying every day, he was kind of coaching me to go for a promotion. And I remember him saying, every day I wake up and I wonder when I'm going to be found out to be a fraud. And I was just like, what? And he goes, yeah, you know, you kind of fake it till you make it every day. And I do kind of, and he said, you know, look at my background. This is where I came from. This is what I'm doing. And he goes, you know, sometimes I think they're going to pull back the curtain and find out. And I just thought, wow. And that whole feeling of one leg at a time, when you look at somebody through different eyes and you realize that they have those same insecurities that I had. So on the one hand, it made me feel like, you know what, I'm not alone in this. This is a guy that I look up to, and he was mentoring me at the time. And I thought, wow, he has those feelings as well. So it's kind of normal. And knowing that it was normal, not saying it's right, but it's normal, a lot of people go through that, made me think, you know what, this is something that I need to get past. And what I started doing next was something that now I know is called shadow work, and I'll talk about that in a little while. But that whole feeling of being an imposter stops us from moving forward. It stops us from reaching our goals, those hopes, dreams, and goals that I talk about. That whole feeling of being an imposter stops us from going forward, stops us from putting our foot out to make a move, because we think, what if I'm not as good as the other person? What if it doesn't work? And when we think to ourselves, oh, it's not going to work, it isn't because we think that the plan we have is rubbish. We think we're rubbish. That's usually what's underneath it. So, you know, that fear of what if my business doesn't work isn't that we think the business itself makes no sense. We know the business makes sense. We know that what it is we want to do, people need it. But the fear is with us and our abilities. So I've put down 3 different ways that we can start getting past that imposter syndrome. Because the thing is, it's going to be there. It rears its ugly head. From the days of college, you know, I had to kind of look at, okay, where did this come from? And that feeling of, you know, not being good enough. Yes, that statement was made in college, but there were other little things that had happened before that made me think, oh, maybe I'm not as good as, or that comparison that we do. But when we identify those things, that's when we can start working on it. And that's another thing where sometimes people get stuck. We identify that there is an issue. We identify that, okay, we've got this fear in us that is stopping us from moving forward. But sometimes what we do is we stop there. So we've identified that, you know, so for example, if I speak about my professor at that time, if I stop there, it would be, this professor said this to me and it really just cut me to the core, and it made me feel as if I was worthless. I felt as if I didn't belong. I didn't do as well as I could have, because I just felt like eyes were on me. And the fact that he said that some of you were going to fail made me made me think that I was going to fail. It's all his fault. And a lot of us stop there. And we stop there because it's everybody else's fault but ours. But when we realize that this may be where it started, it's not the words that cause the problems, it's how we interpreted it. So yes, he stood at the front of the class. Yes, I felt singled out. I sat there, skin prickling, thinking, do the other kids know that I got, because he stood there and he said, some of you got 8, 9 subjects. And I sat there thinking, do they know that I'm one of those people that got 9 subjects? Do they know that he might be referring to me? How I interpreted that was, he's telling me that I'm not good enough and I'm going to fail. And what I did was I drank that Kool-Aid. I took it in. And what I put out was work that wasn't as good as it could have been, because I drank it in and I believed it. What I did many years after was, I remember sitting there one day and I just thought, where on earth does this fear of I can't do this and I can't do that come from? What I didn't realize was, and that's number one of the points where I was saying things that we can do to get past that, not even get past the imposter syndrome, but deal with it when it comes up, because it's always going to come up. And it's kind of like, what's that thing? Is it whack-a-mole, they call it? When it pops its head up, you've got to get the hammer and knock it back down. That's what you got to do with imposter syndrome. But when it comes up, one of the things that you have to do, is shadow work. And I started doing shadow work and didn't even have a clue what it was called. I just knew that I needed to address what was happening for me and these thoughts, because they were not healthy. They were keeping me stuck, and I needed to get past stuck. And what I did was, I remember sitting down one day and thinking, okay, Rachel, you're in this position. Clearly somebody felt, and I was in this job and I was feeling like lost and swamped and not knowing what on earth I was doing with myself. And I remember sitting there thinking, okay, they gave you the job because obviously they thought you were good enough. You know that you can do it, but what is this voice in the back of your head that is telling you that you can't? And I remember getting pen and paper, and I wrote down all of the things that I felt were stopping me from showing up as the best me. Now I look back, I know that I was doing what's called shadow work without knowing that that's what I was doing. And shadow work sounded, when I read it first, I was like, what the hell is shadow work? This don't sound righted. But it's basically looking at that side of you that's hidden. There's nothing sinister about it. It is literally just looking at those, you go back to the times when either you felt fear over something, you were hurt over something, whatever it is that keeps you stuck, whatever it is that evokes that emotion that makes you go inwards and makes you play small. Instead of just burying it, you open the box and you look at it. And what is going to happen is, it might be uncomfortable. You might cry. You may feel like this is not something that I want to look at, because, it makes me feel like, whoa, it is uncomfortable. And it is uncomfortable because if you are looking at the things that make you scared, if you are looking at the things that stop you from moving forward in life, it is those things that evoke fear. And last week I was talking about fear, false evidence appearing real. And when you open up the box, Pandora's box. Don't be scared of Pandora's box. Open that ish up and you start looking at, this is the stuff maybe that I went through as a child. Maybe it was abuse. Maybe it was, being constricted in terms of religion that I speak about. Maybe it was, the thing that professor said to me, or at me, directed at me. You look at it and you go through, where did that start? How did it make me feel? Why did it evoke that type of emotion in it? And you basically look at it for what it is. Then you can start getting past and not be scared of it anymore. It's kind of like, as a child, you might be in the room and you're scared of the boogeyman or whoever it is that lives in the wardrobe. When you put the light on, or you realize that the jacket that's hung up on the back of the door that looks like some masked burglar coming into your room is literally just a harmless jacket on the back of the door, and you are projecting onto it your fears, then you realize that there's nothing there to be scared of anymore. And then that helps you get past that hurdle. So it's literally shining the light on all of the stuff that is coming up into the back of your mind. Remember those thoughts that I spoke about the other day? We have 80,000 thoughts a day. Most of them are unconscious and most of them are negative. And it's about reframing those thoughts so that we can get past them. And that is number 2. So it's reframing. We may be telling ourselves, oh, not good enough. That's not going to work. Why isn't it going to work? What are we saying to ourselves when we're thinking that, I don't think this is going to work? Why? I'm not as good as X. You know, I can't do blah, blah, blah. I don't have these skills. No, it's looking at what skills do you have? What am I good at? Why am I telling myself that I'm not good enough to do X, Y, or Z? And writing that down and reframing it into a positive statement. So again, we can move forward. And then acting as if, that is number 3. And when I remember back to that manager of mine back in the day who said, you know, every day I wake up and I think, you know, when are they gonna uncover me as being a fraud? And every day I come in acting as if. It isn't putting on an act for people so that they think, you know, and walking around as a fake person. That's not what acting as if is. It's doing it for you. You know who you are. Define who you are. When you are working within your purpose, working within your why am I doing this, then you can put things in motion and start acting as if you are already there. So it isn't, like I said, it isn't putting on a show for other people to think, you know, so that people think, oh, that's what they are, and underneath there's no substance. You already have the substance. You know who you are. You are reframing your thoughts, and you're putting those positive thoughts to the fore, and you are acting as if you are already there as 100% whole person in where you see yourself projected into the future. So, like I said, imposter, those thoughts where you feel that you're not good enough, you're not worthy, I don't meet up to the other person who's doing that. And comparison, comparison is a thief of joy. We need to get away from that. And I sometimes, you know, there's people that I absolutely love, but sometimes I just have to unfollow them for a little while, because if I see them do something, I'm like, oh, maybe I should do that. Oh, that looks better. No. Sometimes you just literally need to take yourself away from it and focus in on, this is what I'm doing, because nobody can do me like me. Who says that? I think it's Lisa Nichols. But anyway, I'm saying it now. Nobody can do you like you. No one can do me like me. I'm me. You know, so when you start comparing yourself to others, that helps the imposter syndrome to just kind of fit in, because you're sitting there thinking, I already don't feel good about myself. I'm already not doing what X is doing, so clearly I'm not good enough. You can never win. So imposter syndrome, you know, that feeling is not always going to go away, but we have to be in charge of it. We have to, like I said, whack-a-mole, get that get those reframing thoughts out. So the minute it rears its head and it's just like, oh, can't do that because, nah, I can do it because I know X, Y, Z. These are my skills. I know I'm the bee's knees. So that is my thoughts today on reframing thoughts. Note, that's my thoughts today on imposter syndrome. Thank you for coming in. If you made it to the end of the video, please put my favorite color is blue. Put a blue heart in the comments if you made it to the end of the video. And also don't forget, my group, the Freedom Army, is up and running. And if you want to be with like-minded women who are building their confidence, supporting each other, and owning their voices and their wings, please click in the link. I'm going to put it in the description so that you can come in and be part of that community. It's called the Freedom Army. It is a free group. The only thing I ask for, well, before you get into the group, is just to answer the questions. If you don't answer the questions, it's literally like trying to get past the bouncers at a nightclub. Now you need your ticket. So it's free. But please answer the questions before you come in. It's a ticket, you know, that's your ticket to get in. But other than that, I would love to see you today. Thank you very much, Noreen. And if you've got any ideas for other topics, put it in there. I'd be happy to know what people want to see so that I can fit it in. So thank you very much. And if you think that this video will resonate with anybody, if you think it will help somebody, pass it on. Share the love. I will see you again next week. And remember, this is not a dress rehearsal. We only have one life to live. So let's live it. Let's stand in our power. Let us own our wings so that we can start living rather than existing and leave a legacy. Bye. See you.